Hello, welcome. I'm going to do a brief tutorial here to hopefully show people how to avoid Premiere's evil tendencies when it comes to interpreting the frame rate of image sequences. So let me just explain what's going on here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to import an image sequence. So File, Import. Got one ready here. This is just some footage I got online of a leopard walking. So I'm going to click on the very first image in the sequence, and then I'm going to check this box, make sure that box is checked. So then it's going to go through the sequence of images and import them all, so they'll behave like a video. So I'll say open. So now what I can see here is I've got, in the project, I've got my little image sequence and it's working like a video. So now I want to edit this. I just drag and drop this onto my timeline, and there we go, and I'm ready to go. Now on the surface level, everything looks fine. I hit play and I can see the video and I can scrub and everything's good. But it's not necessarily clear what Premiere has done with its evil tendencies. The first thing to do is to switch how you're looking at the objects in your project. So instead of an icon view, go to list view. And what you'll see is that this footage is being interpreted at 2997. And it isn't. It should be at 24. So this is a really common example with renders, right? So when you bring those in, unfortunately, it's interpreting them at 2997. Now in the sequence, again, the sequence, when you just drag and drop the video into the sequence, it will just use the image sequence's settings, frame rate, to create the sequence. It'll just use that. So because it interpreted this as 2997, then the sequence is at 2997. Now this should be about a second, right? It's about 24 frames. So 24 frames per second, this should be 1 second. But you can see here, if you right click on here, if I go to frames to display that, then I can see, okay, that's 24 frames. That should be about a second if I was at 24 FPS. If I right click here and I set it back to the 2997 time code, you can see that I would have to go all the way here, right to 29, and the next frame, then it would go to 1 second. So what does that mean? Well, it means that unfortunately now this should be 1 second in length, but because it's playing at a higher frame rate, it's chewing through those images really quickly. So that means the video is going to play back faster. So it's less than a second. And then if I go to export this video and then I force that video to be 24, because that's what I want, 24 FPS, then of course that's going to create more artifacts. And what you notice in the output is sort of strobing, dropped frames, duplicate frames. This is because what happens is the way that you're rendering the footage is at 1 frame rate, you bring it into Premiere, it scales it up to a different frame rate, and then you export it back out at 24. The best thing to do is to force Premiere to not do this behavior. So let's try this again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete everything that's in here and my sequence. All right, so how do we avoid this evil behavior that Premiere has? Well, we have to go to Preferences. And then in the Preferences, we're going to go to Media. When we go to Media, then what we'll be able to do is go here and see Indeterminate Media Time Base. This is what we can do to change the defaults in Premiere. So if I set this to 24 FPS, this will match what you're getting with your renders out of your 3D software. So for us, that's Maya. So this way we can make sure that when we get an image sequence, we're not going to have to manually go and interpret the footage. I'll show how that works in a second. But if I change this, then what should happen if I go OK, is that now when I go and import that footage, so I'll go File, Import, I'll go grab that first frame, again, image sequence, say Open. Now when it gets opened and interpreted, the frame rate is now at 24. All right. So now I can drag and drop that here. And now we can see if we go to our time code, we'll right click and see, yep, this 24 FPS time code. Then we get to this point, we can see, okay, that's 24 right there. That's our 1 second. So now this is playing back at the correct speed. So you may not notice that big a difference between 24 and 2997, but particularly if you're working with lip sync. So if you render out your image sequence and then you put it with your lip sync audio, the sync will be off because the images are being played back at a faster frame rate than your original. Now, if for whatever reason I wanted this to be a 2997 and it got this wrong, then how can I fix that? Well, what you have to do is you have to go in here and find a way to interpret the footage. Clip, modify, interpret footage. Then we can go here and tell it what frame rate we want to use. So if you had a clip that was 2997, then we could fix it manually and type that in. So this way we could say, no, this is actually coming in at 2997 or 30. But this is how you can manually go and force the footage to be whatever frame rate you think it should be or what it should be. So let me just cancel that. So right here, this is correct. Now it's at 24. That's the frame rate that I grabbed it at, edited at, and I want to make sure that my frame rate doesn't change. Now, so again, big recap, go to Edit, Preferences, go to Media, and make sure that you change your media from Indeterminate Media Time Base to 24 FPS if you want to stop Premiere from changing everything to 2997 by default. Right, there it is. I hope this was helpful. Again, please, always be careful. Premiere has this evil tendency to force the frame rate. So always double check and make sure, go to the preferences and change it so that you don't have to manually do this for every image sequence that you bring in. It makes editing a demo reel really tedious. If you change this and you're getting renders at 24 FPS, then that means that from now on, everything you bring in should be the right frame rate. Always make sure, go into your project and make sure that you check all the sequences and all the image sequences that they are correct in terms of the frame rate. It's very easy to have mismatches, so just double check and make sure. Hope that helps. Good luck. See you next time.